So one of the most important body systems that we need to go over is the digestive. So digestive system is responsible for nutrient absorption. The entire point of having a digestive system is to break larger molecules and larger food and larger stuff into pieces that are small enough so that we can absorb them. This would consist of breaking down a cheeseburger from big biomolecules like proteins and carbs and lipids into simpler monomers like amino acids and monosaccharides, which are simple sugars, and glycerols and fatty acids, which are tiny pieces of lipids. So like any of the systems on this list, digestive is the main one, but a couple other ones kind of have their hands in the process as well, and we'll kind of touch on those as we get there. But the easiest way is to start with the beginning. So here you go, you're getting ready to eat this cheeseburger. We have to break this thing down so that we can absorb it for energy. So the first thing we gotta do is we gotta chew it. So within the mouth, you got a couple things working. You got teeth and you got the bones of the jaw. So you have a little bit of help from the skeletal system. You got muscles moving the jaw and the muscles in the tongue. So muscular system assists as well. And then you have the actual stuff in the mouth. Once you've broken it down and you've broken it into smaller pieces, you can actually get the digestive system to kick in. You can actually get carbohydrates to start breaking down in your mouth because inside your mouth there's an enzyme, and we've talked about enzymes before. Essentially an enzyme is like a padlock, and when a very specific key gets to the padlock opens. In this case, the enzymes are used to break down a very specific key, a very specific biomolecule, into a smaller piece. You could almost imagine it like this, where you have a little enzyme with two little diamond slots there, and then you have some weird little substrate with two little diamond spots here. This will match up with this. This enzyme's job is to break this into two separate diamonds. Maybe I can absorb this, and that's good. Maybe this little bundle where they're two connected is too big. So the enzyme's job is to break it down. So inside the mouth, the enzyme we deal with, because it's only carbohydrates breaking down in the mouth, it's called amylase. So we'll add this to the list over here as digestive actually starts to take effect. So then the cheeseburger is going to travel down this tube. This tube is the esophagus. The esophagus's job essentially is just to move food from the mouth to the stomach. You can actually swallow upside down or in space where there's no gravity, because the esophagus is going to move the food. It's not just going to fall like you throw a rock down a well. It actually kind of has this wavy motion where the muscles contract and can move food down the throat. Again, this is why when you lean over to pick up a pen, your entire lunch doesn't just pour out of your stomach. It's not just an open tube. It's actually a closed off muscular contraction that will slowly open and then wave its way down to kind of move the food down the pipe. So once again, muscular is involved here. Peristalsis will move it down. It finally settles right here in the stomach. The stomach is actually going to start to break down the next biomolecule, which is proteins. It's going to break this down with something called pepsin. Again, pepsin, just like amylase, is an enzyme, except that the key that unlocks it is protein instead of carbs. The stomach is also going to go through peristalsis. This is what your churning and kind of almost growling of the stomach is. The stomach will kind of wave and move, and it'll continue to break up and kind of almost blend the food in the stomach. So now you got stomach acid and enzymes getting in there to break down the proteins. You continue to break down carbs you've already been breaking down since the mouth. Digestive system's working, muscular system's working, and we can move on to the next step once you kind of make this cheeseburger into a liquefied form. Because remember, the smaller and the smoother we can get the food, the easier it's going to be to absorb. So then we go down into about 20 or so feet of tubing called the small intestine, all bundled in tight. The small intestine has a couple jobs. In the small intestine, I'm going to start to finally break down my lipids. That means that if you eat a fat like butter or oil, it actually does not get broken down on a molecular level until it even hits your small intestine. This is broken down by the enzyme lipase. It's at this point that we have now broken down, or at least started to break down, all of the biomolecules, carbs, proteins, lipids. The small intestine's job now is to absorb all of those tiny pieces. We've broken everything down, we want to absorb all of it. So let's put those guys over here as kind of the main breakdown portions. I have a lot of tubing in the small intestine because I want to absorb as much as possible, but once it gets out of the small intestine, it's going to kind of have a larger portion, as you probably have guessed, that's called the large intestine. The large intestine's job is to absorb water. That is what the entire point of the large intestine really is. We want to remove all the water from the food, we want to suck it up, we want to take it to the kidneys, we want to filter it, we want to use it if we can, or we get rid of it through liquid waste, which is excretory. So large intestine, when working properly, shall try to get all that water and keep it, because that's super important. You want to get as much water from your food as possible. And then anything you don't use, obviously you get rid of through the rectum and anus. I don't know how much detail I need to go into about that. So by this point, you have taken that cheeseburger and you have made it from a big Lego castle as a polymer, and now you've broken it down into monomers and you've broken it down on a chemical level. And that actually brings me to a point that there are two types of digestion. You can mechanically digest it, or you can go through chemical digestion. Mechanical would be like tearing a piece of paper up into tinier pieces. This is the type of digestion that occurs in the mouth. It also occurs through the peristalsis in the stomach. Basically, I'm not changing anything about this on a chemical, molecular level, except I'm just shaking it up and blending it a little bit. Chemical is just breaking it down on a molecular level. This is all of our enzymes. And this pretty much happens anywhere we have an enzyme. In the mouth for carbs, in the stomach for proteins, in the small intestine for lipids. But this is actually changing the molecular structure of whatever it's touching. Again, mostly done by enzymes. If this entire process can't break something down, we probably are going to say that thing is non-edible or maybe non-soluble. Doesn't necessarily mean we don't want you to eat it. For example, fiber is non-soluble and can go all the way through your system and basically work like a weird little roto-rooter to clean out the pipes, so to speak. You can have a good amount of fiber in your diet and it'll keep everything from kind of not really getting bundled up and keep everything moving smoothly and keep your gut pretty healthy. Too much fiber, obviously, would be a poor decision. So don't go eating 50 grams of fiber in one sitting. You'll probably regret it later. And then one more thing I want to mention about digestive is that, like I said, the body systems have so many different functions and overlap so much. You can kind of argue that there are other systems involved as well. You could say that the salivary glands that have the amylase are technically glands. So maybe you say, okay, the endocrine system is involved a little bit. Maybe you say that the brain has to tell your muscles in your mouth to chew and actually activate the tongue and the muscles to contract, and it kind of tells you where the food is so you know where to bite. So maybe you could argue that the nervous system is involved. But as long as you know that this whole system is based off one system, and then it kind of recruits other guys to help it out a little bit, you're in good shape. There are a couple that would be trickier to argue, like for example, trying to bring your reproductive system into your digestive system. I don't really know how they would interact too much, but I'm sure somebody could find some weird connection, because after all, your body communicates with everything. I just don't really know what you do. But in the end, I'm just trying to get 4 calories per gram from my carbs, 9 calories per gram from my lipids, and 4 calories per gram from my proteins, because that's the energy I need, and that's the whole point. Because if you're not eating food for energy, or even eating food that you do not need and your body doesn't need that energy, your body's going to store it for later. Sometimes that's good to have a little energy on hand, sometimes it's not, and it makes you fat. But the digestive system isn't really rocket science. If you're not losing weight, and you say, but I'm eating hardly any food, well then apparently that's too much. Your body basically functions like a math problem. It needs so many calories to live, and if it has a bunch of fat stored up and it's not tapping into those fat stores, something that's going into your system is giving you way more calories than expected. A lot of people, when they start counting calories or counting their macros, realize that they are actually eating way more calories than they anticipated. But the digestive system basically works like a machine. So if you want to own a Ferrari, don't pour a bunch of gasoline in it that you made in your backyard from a pile of old rotten corn. You want to put premium fuel in the engine, because it doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. If what's on the inside is garbage, the outside is going to run like garbage.